Canadians from all walks of life were rightly outraged to learn that the Canadian government was considering potentially getting media organizations, even online news outlets, groups like True North, to get a license from the government if they wanted to operate, to register with the government. Where on earth did all this come from? Well, it in part came from an interview that Heritage Minister Stephen Guilbeault gave to a weekend talk show on Sunday, talking about, yes, we will support these measures because they were proposed in this sweeping review panel that was put forward, a broadcasting review panel that the government convened that put forward 97 recommendations to do a whole variety of things to deal with the changing landscape of broadcasting and the media in the digital realm. Things that included forcing Netflix to include more Canadian content and to change the mandate of the CBC and even increase CBC's funding, all these sorts of ideas. Sort of like CRTC regulations, revising them, developing them for the new and changing landscape. Part of that, one of those 97 recommendations, it involved, yes, licensing and regulating the media. Why? Where did this idea even come from? I think part of the problem is that there's this general sense of inertia in government that they should have their fingers in every single pie. That there's stuff happening, businesses are doing things, industries are changing. Well, we want to be involved. We want to tell them how to change. We want to grant them permission. We want to have a say in all of this. What happened to people just doing their thing and the government getting out of the way? It's rather sad that politicians' natural mindsets, this is why it's kind of hard to blame Stephen Guilbeault. I do blame him. He said it. He did it. But he's also just in this feeder system now where politicians go, okay, here I am. I'm elected. I govern all. I'm in charge of all aspects of your life. No, that's not how it works. And I think Stephen Guilbeault was caught off guard a little bit when there's outrage from everybody, from different political corners, from people all across the media saying, we are unhappy with this. So he took to the airwaves. He convened an emergency press conference on Monday to say, let's make it clear, we are not planning to do this. And he turned around and said, so let's wait and see what our proposed legislation actually says. What? So you're still doing some sort of legislation because you must deal with this issue. Oh no, there's emerging online streaming services and there's new ways to access the internet and changing Wi-Fi and stuff. We can't let this happen, or at least we can't let it happen without us controlling it and us having our say. Let's really be on guard about what this legislation says. Let's keep a keen eye on it and hold him to his idea that no, we're not going to require the media to regulate, to register, and to be licensed. Because here's the thing, and a lot of people didn't catch this point, we already do require the media to register to some degree. Last year, I appeared before the House of Commons Finance Committee. People wanted to have an independent media person speak who wasn't a representative of any sort of union or consortium and so forth to give the individual perspective on all this. And this was about the media bailout. And I didn't so much present my ideas on whether I support it or I don't support it. Quite frankly, I don't think government and media should be touching each other with a 10-foot pole, so I don't think that the government should be doing this stuff. But I want to offer my ideas on how they were trying to implement it. And one thing that really concerned me is that they weren't giving out this $600 million as if it was a sort of tax credit. You know how we have transit tax credits, and they say, okay, well, if you've paid the transit fee, if you've bought the bus pass, show it to your accountant and you get the tax credit. It was that simple. No, they were looking at doing something very different with media, where they would determine who is this sort of tier of media. The actual term that they use, reading from the government websites that are still up, is whether or not one is a qualified Canadian journalism organization. Yes, they were registering people, basically accrediting them as being qualified journalism organizations. And maybe you would fit the bill, or maybe you wouldn't. A status, a necessary condition for each of the proposed measures that they have that they are still planning to do within the media bailout. So how are they going to decide who is this QCJO, as the literature describes it as? Well, they are creating a panel. Yes, there will be people assigned in the federal government to determine what is and what isn't, in their view, a valid media organization. So this is probably why it wasn't too difficult for Stephen Guilbeault to talk about licensing all outlets, because they're already trying to accredit and determine who is legit and who isn't out of the ones that are taking the media bailout money. So it's not that difficult for them to just stretch it a little further and say, well, let's do this to all of them. So let's be concerned about this. And it's good news that Stephen Guilbeault was pushed into a corner. He had to convene that press conference and he had to say, no, we're not doing this. But in some ways, they already are. And let's talk about whether or not we think that's acceptable, in what ways we'd like to see it changed, and in what ways what's already happening can inform us being on guard against the things that may come next.